Let's talk to the man about all this government corruption. And specifically, we're not going to focus on the new shiny object. We're going to focus on Arctic Frost at first with, of course, Mike Benz, Executive Director at the Foundation for Freedom Online. All right, Mike, Arctic Frost is something, it's a name that everybody watching here is familiar with, but they may be confused about the origins of it. What did they actually do? I am handing it over to you. What was Arctic Frost and why was Arctic Frost?
Well, Arctic Frost is serendipitously the name of a orange tree that happens to also grow in Florida. It was effectively just cheekily, appears to be cheekily named in the same way that Operation Crossfire Hurricane was named after the lyrics in the Jumping Jack Flash Rolling Stones song, where Jumping Jack Flash is a movie starring Whoopi Goldberg about being chased around by British spies. And just as Trump was chased around by British spies with Russiagate and its origins in Christopher Steele and Richard Dearlove and the Steele dossier, Arctic Frost appears to have been in operation to have rid the country of orange trees. Basically, removing all support for Donald Trump, root and branch, targeting 430 different GOP officials. As I believe Ted Cruz said, 20% of Senate Republicans, Trump's media allies, political allies, civil society organizations like the Conservative Partnership Institute, wiretapping, secretly getting their cell phone communications, including the official phones of sitting senators, including those on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is supposed to oversee FBI at all times in order to ensure the FBI is not abusing or overstepping in its authorities. And so this would be, effectively like a defendant spying on the judge, the secret communications of the judge who is going to rule on his case and determine his innocence or guilt. This is a crime, I should note. There are statutes that we have under federal law that require the Senate and House to be apprised of any such attempt to meddle in those communications, so that the Congress is able to conduct its oversight authorities. I have been arguing that Judge Boasberg, who it was effectively the two in the 1-2 punch here. You had Jack Smith, who was the lead prosecutor in this. Jack Smith was cryogenically unfrozen from a USAID rule of law program in Kosovo in The Hague to descend on our own domestic politics for this operation. He had previously gone after a Republican governor in Virginia and was whomped 9-0 in the Supreme Court, but they rolled him out again. And he worked with Judge Boasberg to get secret subpoenas against Senate Republicans. And I believe that this is a conspiracy charge that should be brought. And you can frankly do that with the Justice Department. You don't need a 60-40 impeachment vote like you do to impeach a judge. So I'm not convinced that the impeachment efforts against Judge Boasberg will work. Judge Boasberg was also the one who let Ray Epps go for the January 6th incitement. This is just a total blob job up and down. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that the technical predicate that was rolled out in order to justify this sweeping 430-person dragnet all around Trump was the alternate electors concept. Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election. The alternate electors concept came from the Democrats. In the Democrats, Norm Eisen and crew, and the John Podesta actually was the one who was role-played Joe Biden in the Transition Integrity Project election simulator where in June 2020, 5 months before the election, he literally role played together with the head of the DNC and the former head of the RNC, Michael Steele, a never Trump Republican, how in the event of a clear Trump win in the Electoral College, they would unveil hordes of Black Lives Matter protesters on the streets while simultaneously lobbying to abolish the Electoral College and have the popular vote winner be the one ushered in on Inauguration Day, and that they would even invoke a breakdown on January 6th to make this happen, so that the bicameral meeting of Congress would not vote for Donald Trump because of the breakdown on January 6th. And so everything that the FBI did to Republicans, this FBI would be fully justified doing if that legal predicate is indeed okay against Democrats. And the final thing on this is that they did not start this until 2022, until Trump was on the verge of announcing he was going to run for president again. This entire Arctic frost operation was done only because Trump was going to run again.
Mike, okay, there's so much to take apart here. I want to start with this. Targeting, you mentioned collecting phone calls, text messages. We know from information that's out there right now, they were actually collecting locations. Where was Senator Blackburn when she was doing this? To what end? Now, don't get me wrong, that's really, really bad, but I've got 400 conservatives, some senators in my crosshairs. I'm grabbing this text message, this phone, this location. Let's say I'm the Cheka, known as the FBI. What do I do from there? What's the purpose of all this?
What you're doing is you're fishing for crimes. Once you have the predicate, see, I did a video about 2 years ago called Proxies, Pretexts, and Predicates. And it's basically the way all this junk works when you are trying to do a dirty operation. You have a proxy you are trying to take out. In this case, it's Trump world, the Trump side of the Republican Party. So you need a pretext in order to justify going against that proxy. In this case, it would be criminal wrongdoing. And so you need to create a predicate to go after them criminally. And the predicate in this case was the alternate electors plot. But once you crack that predicate open, you can do anything you want. You can find all manner of other scandals that they may be, a hush-hush talking to their friends about. You can leak that to the media as the Chris Wray FBI leaked like a sieve, as James Comey is currently facing charges over his leaks and the lengths to which he went through Daniel Richman, allegedly, in what appear to be completely bombshell, damning court filings filed by Lindsay Halligan, who they're now trying to disbar so that she can't continue with the prosecution. But effectively, what you have here is a fishing expedition. Once you open up this wide predicate, then all manner of other predicates open up once you break that initial seal. And this has been their strategy, is to make these things as wide as possible. You say, okay, well, a witting or unwitting agent of Russia, for example, was like what they started the Russiagate probe over. But they didn't nail a single person for working with the Russians. They got them on all manner of other BS charges. Like Michael Flynn they targeted Michael Flynn for, effectively Russiagate. And this is what they argued. They argued that Michael Flynn, because of evidence collected from Stephen Halper, who was a former CIA guy involved in Iran-Contra, and what happened at University of Cambridge, they said, well, Michael Flynn may be working with the Russians. And then what was on that napkin written by James Comey's goons? They said, what is our goal here? Is it to get him fired or get him to perjure himself? You'll notice neither of those things have to do with what the formal predicate was. You would think the goal of the meeting would be to find out if he's really working with the Russians, since that's what you used as the predicate to open up the case against him, the investigation against him. But what they were asking their boss, James Comey, the FBI czar, was not, what is our goal in terms of finding out whether he's working with the Russians? It was, is our goal to get him fired from his job, to meddle in domestic politics using the power of the FBI, or is it to get him to lie to us so that we can hit him with other charges? That's what they're doing with everyone.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. First of all, I want to focus on this predicate thing you were just touching on there. And I know it is the lamest, most naive question in the world. I know this ahead of time, but that kind of thing sounds like it should be illegal, and frankly has to be illegal. If I'm the FBI or the Houston Police Department, I can't say we're looking into Jesse Kelly for tax evasion and then comb through my text messages to see if I speed or something like that. You're not supposed to be allowed to do that, right? So how did they do that?
This is the big trick. If you remember, the head of the ODNI, James Clapper, perjured himself when he was talking to Congress and said that the NSA does not collect any communications about domestic conversations, civilian domestic U.S. citizens, and as they're not allowed to. But what they do is, as it came out in the Snowden leaks, they collect not just some, they collect all U.S. citizen communications. And what they do is they say, well, that's incidental bulk collection. You know, if we are going to comb through your iPhone, iCloud photos to see whether or not you're talking with the Russians or have taken a picture of what time it is in Russia, well, in the process of looking through all your photos, yeah, we're going to see everything else that you've saved in your iCloud. And if we see a crime, well, we can't help. It's effectively like the Fourth Amendment law, the Fourth Amendment search and seizure rule about open view. Right? If the police pull you over for speeding, but they see you have an open alcohol container in the passenger seat, or they smell weed in the car, well, they have no choice but to now pursue the secondary and tertiary crimes that they just saw on the way to this investigation, which required them to read all of your communications, all of your emails, look at all of your photos. And this is, but to your point, I have been calling for criminal penalties for misuse of criminal predicates. I think that this FBI should be forced, not just this, every FBI, now and forevermore, should be forced to pick its spots. If it is going to open a criminal investigation on someone, it better be damn sure there's a there, or else there should be penalties for those who have been targeted. Criminal penalties against the people who opened a false predicate. Defendants should be able to file countersuits against the FBI in order to put their case before a judge and jury that the case was falsely opened. A jury of their peers should be able to hear whether or not there was really sufficient evidence to open that predicate. And if there is not, there should be at the very least civil penalties, all legal fees that are, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I mean, I was talking to someone at Mar-a-Lago just last week who had to spend $4 million in legal fees because the FBI opened a case against them for what they considered to be a $75,000, you're paying $4 million in legal fees to defend yourself against, an investigation over campaign finance that amounted to $75,000. This is a bankrupting tool. And if you listen to Norm Eisen and Mark Elias and these types, they are very, very painfully aware that the process is the punishment. And this is, you can hear them on MSNBC. Ken Delanian and these CI mouthpieces will talk about how, even if, no matter what happens, think about the legal fees. Think about the legal fees. This is going to take them out politically because they're going to be in debt for the rest of their lives because of the legal fees. And that is what they did to my friends when I was in the White House. That was what they did to almost every Trump ally. And I believe that the FBI, frankly, I believe Kash Patel's initial plans around turning the FBI into a deep state museum. I actually think that can be best achieved through effectively bankrupting the FBI with a cascade of plaintiffs filing suits against the FBI for targeting them. If the FBI's budget was constrained every year by the legal defense fund, or I should say, really, the legal restitution fund they have to set aside for all the people they wrongly target, that will force the FBI to pick its spots. It cannot go, if it wants to do these fishing expeditions, well, it's going to lose, it's going to probably fire 5,000, 10,000 people, because when those plaintiffs strike back, when those defendants become plaintiffs, the FBI is going to be slammed in its budget because it won't be able to afford all of its other core functions, because it will be forced to defend itself in court constantly for wrongly opening predicates. And so I think that sort of measure would be it would level the playing field between the sharks and the minnows.
Well, no worries, Mike. The GOP Senate was kind enough to give its senators, a nice little carve out in the recent CR, so they can certainly sue and bring in tons of money. Now, I've combed through my records. I didn't see any carve-outs at all for someone like you, someone like me, one of those poor innocent January 6ers. They got no carve-outs. They got nothing. But boy, you offended GOP senator. They've found a way to make sure they've got some cash coming their way. I'm so steamed about it. If you can't tell, Mike, I'm just freaking steamed about the whole thing.
Well, right. I mean, you want institutional reforms, not a one-time payout to themselves. I mean, this is... frankly, it looks a little gross. There has been no reforms yet. There's a lot of bark and there's no bite. As I showed on X in a post that got over 1 million views. So I know folks in Congress saw it. There's been no attempt for the Justice Department to seek redress against Jack Smith, against Judge Boasberg. Judges are not above the law. Prosecutors are not above the law. And frankly, I think that the entire relationship between the U.S. federal government and the American Bar Association, which is at the root of the American legal profession, has to be profoundly and entirely renegotiated. The American Bar Association led the charge against Trump in the indictments. The American Bar Association still has a legal monopoly from the Department of Education to credential American law schools. The American Bar Association has gotten hundreds of millions of dollars from USAID to work with courts and prosecutors and judges all over the world to build this global blob network that they can tap into for favors. It's effectively a bribery and judicial promotion network. If you want to get in good to graduate to Chief Justice of your district court section, or move your way up the appellate court or on the Supreme Court shortlist, you move through these American Bar Association World Justice Project networks. The World Justice Project is a spin-out of the American Bar Association. It too has gotten tens of millions of dollars from USAID to build up these worldwide networks. There are 4 former Supreme Court justices on its board, as well as the CEOs of major multinational corporations and hedge funds. But the entire legal profession has to be reconceived in terms of the institutions who are put in charge of it, with a federal government monopoly, given the corruption within our judiciary. And this is the best time in human history to go after that, when you have a Republican president who is directly targeted by it, a Republican majority House that was targeted by it, a Republican majority Senate that was targeted by it, and a Republican majority Supreme Court that will be hearing challenges to these reforms. So, it's, as Elvis said, it's now or never. Don't wait too late.
Mike, I don't want to divert away from all this stuff, but I have to ask this question. Russia, and I know this is more of a broad question. It's not just about Arctic frost. Why so much centered around Russia? Seems to be used by these communists as a justification for everything. Russia, he's linked to Russia. Russia may be this, Russia may be that. What is this? What is this relentless obsession with Russia? What is that, Mike? What is that?
That's the amount of raw resources that Russia sits on in total. If you add up all of the oil, all of the gas, all of the rare earth minerals, all of the coal, all of the copper, all the aluminum, all the lithium, all the cobalt, all the gold, all the arable land agriculture. Uh, Russia is the great untapped world home of natural resources. They have $75 trillion worth of natural resources. So just think about what would happen if Russia could be regime changed and a puppet government could be put in place. Russia could be turned into a client state. And think about Wall Street hedge funds, private equity, alternative asset investors in Wall Street and London who would profit if only Russia would just belly up and give its $75 trillion worth of natural resources to them. And everything else is subservient to that. The Ukraine war will never end because it's not about Ukraine. It's about Eurasia. It's about the 75 trillion. What we are doing in the Caspian, in that region, will never end. It's about the 75 trillion. What we're doing in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Mongolia, it will never end. It will never end until Boris Yeltsin is resurrected from the grave and put in, given some kind of cryogenic therapy and infused with some sort of IV drip so that Boris Yeltsin is, from his undead throne, put back in charge of Russia and giving away that 75 trillion to the political donor class, the donor drafter class in New York City and London.
So it's all about money in the end. It's all this relentless Russia this and Russia that, Ukraine. It's all about wanting what Russia has and won't let us have?
Yeah. Now you have to understand there's, in addition to that 75 trillion, Russia has been the bane of U.S. foreign policy since about 2003 to 2005 is really when it started. We had effectively taken over Russia from 1991 to 1998 during the Yeltsin years. The State Department even effectively rigged the 1996 election in Russia to ensure that Boris Yeltsin won despite having less than 10% approval. There's a Hollywood movie about this called Spinning Boris that I think is worth watching for folks who want to see an entertaining kind of take on what was done. I mean, we sent Hollywood over there. We sent tens of millions of dollars of USAID money to prop Boris Yeltsin up. I mean, it was a real weekend at Bernie's that was done. And at the end of the day, Russia lost 90% of its stock market. The life expectancy went down about a decade for the average Russian citizen, all under U.S. vassal state control. Putin rose out of the ashes of that, and the Russian people felt completely betrayed by the U.S. guiding hand towards private market capitalism, because all the publicly held wealth by the Soviet Union that was in a communist government held at least nominally for the people. Of course, it was completely corrupt state, but it didn't. At the end of the day, those assets were sold off to Western firms in large part, other than a few handful of industries like oil and gas. And then when Putin came to power, he began to use the oil and gas, as John McCain said, they're a gas station with an army. And he began to use that to reassert political control over Central and Eastern Europe. He began to reverse the gains of the post-Cold War NATO and EU expansion. As the history tells it, invaded Georgia. Of course, Georgia actually attacked Russia first, but story for another time. And in doing so, undermined Republican oil and gas interests in the Caspian, this Azerbaijan to Georgia pathway that the Bush family and the Romney family were invested in. But but hadn't hit the Democrats yet because the Democrats were mostly concentrated in terms of their energy investments in Ukraine. So this is what the Russian reset was about. The Obama administration and Hillary Clinton and George Soros thought that they could play nice with Russia and trade to get access to that 75 trillion. And this is where you have the uranium one and Hillary Clinton green-lighting the sale of 20% of America's uranium to Russia during this period, and you had Russian oligarchs paying the Clinton Global Foundation. The Republicans were furious about this because their donor class wasn't getting paid off by the Russians. But then when we tried to go for the whole enchilada by overthrowing the democratically elected, relatively fair government of Ukraine in 2014, Russia struck back by backstopping the eastern province breakaway state in the Donbass and in Crimea with the Russian annexation, the Democratic vote within Crimea to join the Russian Federation. And at that point, the Democrat donors got hit, and so there became this bipartisan alliance after 2014 that what we need is regime change in Russia and a full new Cold War. And anyone who stands in the way of that is going to get treated the same way anyone was treated, siding with the Soviet Union in the Cold War. The difference is this time the opposition mostly came from right-wing populists and nationalists as opposed to left-wing communists, so that conveniently we have an apparatus already set up at the CIA, FBI, Department of War, USAID, the NGO sphere, the media, the unions, the legal advocacy and rule of law programs to neutralize anyone who opposes the foreign policy establishment on the Cold War, and they simply did it with Cold War 2.0.
Mike, awesome as always. Thank you, brother. Come back soon. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.